Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our March Wellbeing webinar on the truth about diets, brought to you by Univera Healthcare. With March being National Nutrition Month, we thought it was the perfect opportunity to leverage one of our own internal experts and registered dietitians at the health plan to discuss the topic of diets. So we are so excited to have so many of you here who are interested in learning more about this topic. So I want to start out by welcoming everyone and thanking you for taking the time out of your day to join us here today for our third webinar, part of our Understanding Your Wellbeing webinar series that we launched in 2025. My name is Katie Keller-Burgess, and I am part of the wellbeing team here at Univera Healthcare. So I will be the host for today's webinar, teeing up our guest speaker, Catherine Townsend, who will be the presenter for once again our webinar on the truth about diets. All right, so a few housekeeping items that I do want to start us off with here today. First off, please note that today's webinar and all of our 2025 wellbeing webinars are being recorded and are being housed on our Univera Healthcare YouTube page. So if you need to go back to this recording and listen to it, or maybe access past recordings or future recordings, once again, you have that on-demand access to those monthly webinars right on our YouTube page. Another housekeeping item that I wanted to call out is that our participants' microphones and cameras are automatically disabled. There will be time at the end of the webinar for questions with our guest speaker. So if you do have any questions at any point throughout today's webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A feature in the Teams meeting. So at the top of your Teams meeting, there should be a Q&A icon. And once again, enter any questions that you may have at any point throughout today's webinar and any of the information being covered. And at the end, we will get to questions. And the last housekeeping item, and most importantly, please note that the content covered today is simply educational in purpose. And of course, if you have any health-related question and or concern, we recommend you connect with your primary care provider. Or if you have any benefit-specific related concern, please contact the customer care number that is on the back of your Univera Healthcare member ID card. So once again, just some housekeeping items to have started us off with there today. So with that being said, I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker here today. Once again, Catherine Townsend. Catherine holds her master's in science and is a registered dietitian and a certified dietitian nutritionist. Now, she has been with the health plan over 6 years now as one of our registered dietitians. And prior to coming to the health plan, she worked as an outpatient registered dietitian in a federally qualified health center that had various locations throughout the Western New York region. Prior to that, she actually worked for a county health department in North Carolina and also worked in the WIC department. So Catherine continues to support individuals through her role as a registered dietitian with the health plan, helping them to develop the skills and tools necessary to maintain and develop healthy eating behaviors. So I am so thrilled that she is able to join us here today and present our March Wellbeing webinar on, once again, the topic of the truth about diets. So Catherine, with that being said, thank you for joining us here today, and I will turn the stage over to you.
Great. Thanks, Katie, and thanks everyone for coming. Let me just take control here. Okay. So today I'm going to review a wide variety of things related to nutrition and diets, including the importance of nutrition. I'll talk about diet, eating patterns, and eating styles, along with ways to get you started on your nutrition journey. And then Katie will wrap things up at the end, talking about some additional resources and related benefits. So to start us off, why is nutrition important in general? According to the CDC, following a healthy dietary pattern can help people maintain good health and reduce the risk of chronic disease throughout life. Some of the many benefits of healthy eating can include helping you live longer, benefiting a wide variety of aspects of your body, including keeping your skin, teeth, and eyes healthy, supporting your muscles, boosting your immunity, keeping your bones strong. It can help lower your risk for different chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes. Can support healthy pregnancies and breastfeeding, along with a healthy digestive system, and also just helping to achieve and maintain a healthy weight. So, a lot of times when people think nutrition, they already think about diets. And there's obviously, they're interrelated, but a little bit different because diets typically focus on removing certain foods or food groups from your everyday eating. This can actually end up leading to a negative perception of food and psychological effects as well, such as loss of confidence or feelings of failure, because diets can be difficult and we don't always see the results that we want. Um, people put so much money towards diets every year. In fact, a total of $33 billion were spent on weight loss, or are spent, apologies, on weight loss products. In 2019, the US weight loss market actually reached a record worth of $78 billion. And in 2023, it was actually estimated to be worth $90 billion. So net worth just keeps going up every year. To add to this, 45 million Americans go on diets every year. But despite this, 2 in 5 US adults still have obesity. So clearly, there's a disconnect somewhere. And also, to just go a little bit further onto this, 65% of dieters return to their pre diet weight within 3 years. Only 5% of people who follow a restrictive diet and lose weight will actually keep it off. On top of that, 35% of normal, casual dieters will actually progress to pathological dieting and chronic dieting. And then of those individuals, 20 to 25% can actually develop eating disorders. And remember, an eating disorder isn't something that just impacts teenagers or young women. It can happen to any age, gender, or walk of life. We're all susceptible. And just digging a little bit deeper into diets and maybe why it's so difficult to maintain those benefits. So you start a diet, usually it leads to restriction, as I mentioned, and that can lead you to feeling deprived and being tempted to eat some of those foods you're trying to eliminate. It can lead to those cravings, and eventually we can't avoid those cravings anymore, so we give in. Sometimes go a little bit overboard. And that leads us to feel guilty. It leads to that low self-esteem, poor confidence, feeling like we weren't able to keep up with this diet. A lot of times we'll give up and then we'll start over, whether we start back on the diet we were trying to follow or we pick up a new one. And there's a lot of diets that we can pick up on, try, one after the other. And a lot of times we kind of go to those fad diets just because they often offer quick results, which is what we want to see. But if you can see here, fad diets have actually been around for a very, very long time, kind of further perpetuating that diets aren't necessarily the most effective and healthy way to go about weight loss and healthy lifestyle change. So from here, been around since the 1920s. The keto diet is listed from the 1920s, and I do want to actually point out that the keto diet, which I will go over shortly, is actually developed for children with epilepsy to help with seizures. And it wasn't really known as a weight loss diet until more recent years, but still kind of started things off in the 20s there. Either way, I'm sure you've heard about many of these diets, maybe even tried some of them. And some of you may have been successful. Some of you may have struggled, and that's okay. That's why there's so many different diets, because everybody needs something different. But bottom line is, just because a diet is popular, it doesn't mean it's effective or healthy. And I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into some examples of some popular diets, some popular eating styles, and kind of go from there. But before that, I also just wanted to point out some common signs of a fad diet. Many of them promise pretty much all of these things, such as rapid weight loss with no need to exercise. They can also include recommending specific quantities of food, requiring limitations, specific food combinations, and they also can sometimes come along with very rigid menus. But most importantly, and one of the reasons why most people tend to struggle to maintain diets long term and see that long term success is because they're not there's no scientific backing. There's no evidence that these things really are proven to work. So, like I mentioned, I'm going to go into some pros and cons of different popular diets and eating patterns and styles. So, the diets are going to be more of those programs that people will follow that have those limitations, like the fad diets. Eating styles and eating patterns give a little bit more guidance, and as I'm sure you'll see, some of them will actually encourage more of that long-term, lifestyle change that we're looking for. So starting us off is the keto diet, as I mentioned before, also known as the ketogenic diet. So this has been popular for quite some time as a weight loss diet specifically. It's known to be very high in fat, moderate in protein, and to encourage very, very low intake of carbs. The focus needs to be on high fat in order to achieve and maintain what is called ketosis, which is where our body burns fat for energy. It's also important to note that it's actually not just carbohydrates that can interfere with your body reaching ketosis. Our body can also break down protein if needed. So that's why you really have to focus on that moderate protein intake, not getting too much. So the keto diet can lead to weight loss. Some people do find it to be effective, but one thing to note is that it is typically due to water loss from that decrease in carbs. And this is because carbohydrates, they're stored in the body as a compound known as glycogen, and glycogen is stored alongside water. So if you're not eating carbs, you're using up your glycogen stores, and therefore that water is going out with it. So you'll see that very quick weight loss in the beginning. And this isn't just with keto, it's on a lot of different low-carb diets. Additionally, because there is still a moderate intake of protein, people do tend to retain muscle mass versus other diets that might require just very, very low calories, so you might not be getting enough protein in order to preserve some of that muscle. Although there are those little pros, there's quite a few cons for the keto diet. By restricting and excluding food groups, the keto diet requires a huge shift in eating patterns that isn't generally sustainable long term. It tends to be very high in saturated fat as well, which can increase the risk of heart disease and other chronic conditions. And yes, there are unsaturated fats that are much more heart healthy, but it can be difficult to truly do keto while eating primarily unsaturated fats because many of these foods also contain carbs, typically in the form of fiber, such as avocados or nuts, very high in healthy unsaturated fats, but some carbs come along with it, which can actually throw you out of ketosis. Additionally, when starting to follow the keto diet, people may find that they become constipated, generally due to the drastic decrease in fiber intake because you're cutting out carbs, including fruits and vegetables. And they also can feel sick near the beginning of the diet. And they call that the keto flu because the body is adapting to being in ketosis, and it doesn't necessarily like that. Glucose, broken down from carbs, is the primary and preferred source of energy for the body. So it takes a little getting used to when your body is primarily using fats for energy. There's also some long-term concerns if you keep up the ketogenic diet for a while, which includes kidney stones, liver disease, and vitamin and mineral deficiencies because you are eliminating numerous food groups. Bottom line for keto is that there's still a lot of concerns surrounding it, and the jury is still out on whether it really is a good tool for weight loss and for other health benefits, especially when followed long-term. Moving on to the Paleolithic diet, also known as the paleo diet. This one has also been pretty popular for a while. It can also be called like the caveman diet, as it claims to encourage dietary patterns similar to those of our caveman ancestors. This diet, as opposed to keto, is actually high in protein and moderate in fat, and low to moderate in carbohydrates. And it does focus on those high fiber foods, and it also does encourage limited processed foods. And both of those are pros to the paleo diet. We're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables, which are high in fiber and a lot of good nutrition. And because processed foods are limited, sugar and salt is also restricted, which is obviously good for overall health as well. However, due to the focus on high protein and moderate fat, intake of these macronutrients may exceed the daily recommendations and what's actually healthy. Additionally, since plant-based proteins such as beans are restricted, in order to get the protein that you need, you're going to be eating a lot of meat. And a high intake of meat, especially red meat, can increase the risk for cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And in addition to the elimination of beans and legumes, dairy and whole grains are also restricted on the paleo diet. And as we've discussed, anytime a food group is eliminated, there's going to be nutrient deficiency concerns. Also, the paleo diet can be difficult to maintain long term since those food groups are eliminated, and it encourages an intake of higher cost foods, especially now. Meat and eggs, the cost has skyrocketed. So it can be really difficult to maintain long term just, for your wallet. It can also increase the risk for disordered eating, like many other diets that are eliminating certain food groups. So overall, with the paleo diet, just like keto, there's not enough long-term studies to really show if paleo is a safe diet and if it's actually effective to follow long-term. Moving on to another diet that's been pretty popular for a while, and that's going gluten-free. Originally, the gluten-free diet was developed for individuals with celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity. However, over time, it has also been promoted as a way of eating that can encourage weight loss. So gluten-free, or I guess gluten specifically, is a protein that's found in wheat, barley, rye, and triticale, which is a cross between wheat and rye. And honestly, the main benefit, the main pros of going gluten-free are really only seen when you have celiac disease or that non-gluten celiac sensitivity. Individuals who need to, which are the individuals that need to eliminate gluten for medical reasons. If you can tolerate gluten, you have no concerns there. There's really no known benefits to the gluten-free diet. If anything, there can actually be quite a few cons. First of all, foods that are made to be gluten-free tend to be a lot more expensive. And it can also take some forethought and some meal planning to make sure you're getting a balanced diet while still remaining gluten-free. On top of that, products that are made to be gluten-free, so things like gluten-free bread and crackers that aren't naturally gluten-free, can be very low in fiber, and they also have a higher salt and sugar content to help them maintain that palatability. Plus, cutting out gluten-containing grains unnecessarily can impede nutrient intake as well, because whole grains are very good sources of iron, B vitamins, fiber, and more. So overall, products that are made to be gluten-free are in fact not healthier or lower calorie than gluten-containing foods, as some articles and websites may say. There's also not enough evidence to show that following a gluten-free diet will provide any benefit for those who don't have celiac disease, gluten sensitivity, or wheat allergy, at least for the wheat aspect of things with gluten. Hi, now talking about a diet regimen or pattern that's intermittent fasting. Once again, covering some of the popular diets. So this one's also been around for quite some time, and it really seems to still be quite popular. There are so many different types of intermittent fasting. A few common examples are the 16-8, which includes a 16-hour fast with an 8-hour eating window, 5-2, where you eat normally for 5 days and then restrict calories to 500 to 600 on 2 non-consecutive days per week, or fasting completely. and then alternate day fasting, which entails fasting for 24 hours, or if you can't necessarily fast completely, consuming very, very low calories, like 500 to 1,000 on those fasting days, and then eating normally on opposite days. So, one of the pros is obviously that personalization. You can decide what type of intermittent fasting you want to follow that works best for you. And it may also promote weight loss in some, depending on how the diet, the regimen is executed. Um, but because um, of this limited time, this limited eating window, as they call it, it can be really difficult to get adequate nutrition, get that balanced diet that your body needs. So obviously the calorie restriction is what can help with weight loss, but we're still not necessarily getting a balanced diet. You have to be very cognizant with your food choices in order to make sure you're getting enough in those few eating days or that 8-hour eating window, for example. And that fasting can lead to excessive hunger, which actually further makes making those healthy decisions difficult because you just want food as soon as your fast ends. So meal planning is definitely something that can come in handy with intermittent fasting. So you have those healthy foods prepped and ready to go to encourage those better choices. For some, fasting can also cause brain fog. You can feel lack of energy, especially while you are doing the fasting, and a slow metabolism, which is obviously counterproductive to weight loss. It can even increase the risk for gallstones due to a disruption in a normal eating pattern. And there's concerns for those with chronic diseases, especially with diabetes. If you're going a long time without eating, it can increase your risk for lows. If you're eating a lot when your fast is over, it can cause spikes. So, overall, once again, science is lacking for intermittent fasting and long term effects are still unknown. Now, moving on to detoxes and cleanses. Once again, been around for a very, very long time. There's a lot of different iterations of detoxes and cleanses, but typically they all claim to do at least one, if not multiple, of the following: removing toxins from your body, aiding in weight loss, and promoting health. These these diets can also involve fasting, eating specific foods, avoiding certain foods. A lot of times they come with supplements or teas that you should be taking. Um, there are actually some pros that people find with detoxes and cleanses. Some people find that it actually gives them a jump start, and that's typically when it's a shorter fast or shorter detox or cleanse, such as like 5 or 7 days, because you're eliminating a lot of different foods in order to be compliant with a detox or a cleanse. So you can get rid of a lot of the processed options and alcohol and a lot of things that may be difficult to give up. And then you're slowly adding them back in once the cleanse is over. So you can really kind of meter what foods you're adding back in. And some people find that it's kind of motivating. Some people also do find that they feel more focused and energetic during and after detox or cleanses. That's usually due to the processed foods and the alcohol that are eliminated. But if you're keeping up these detoxes and cleanses long term, you're going to notice the opposite, where you're feeling less focused and energetic. Just because foods and calories are so drastically restricted, we can't feel very good on that for a very long amount of time. And just as with other diets, weight may come off pretty quickly in the beginning, but once again, water weight. So once this program is stopped, your weight's going to return right back to normal. And due to drastic restrictions, these diets are also not sustainable, like I mentioned, and they're not typically safe to follow long term, especially if you have other chronic diagnoses to go along with it that you're working to manage. There's also a lot of safety concerns, spanning from the inadequate nutrition to supplements suggested being unsafe and unregulated. So, the bottom line for detoxes and cleanses is that your body removes toxins on its own. So, you don't need to follow a cleanse or a detox to do so. Most of the time, people who claim to be experts on detoxification have no credentials either, and there's a lack of research to support the use of these diets. So, moving on to a little more positive feeling conversation, we're going to talk about a couple popular eating patterns or styles. They're patterns or styles because these are meant to be lifestyle changes and they're not requiring any sort of elimination. So, to start us off, I'm going to quickly review the DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. It was originally developed in the 1990s to help lower blood pressure without the use of medication, but it's now actually considered one of the gold standards for healthy eating in general. The DASH diet encourages a healthy, nutrient-dense diet that includes whole grains, vegetables, fruits, fish, poultry, beans, nuts, and healthy oils. And it limits, not eliminates, foods high in saturated fat, like those fatty meats and everything. So it's putting the focus on lean meats, plant-based proteins, and healthy oils such as olive oil. It's also recommended on the DASH diet to limit sugar-sweetened beverages, sweets, and processed foods. Also, with the blood pressure standpoint, the foods recommended are high in calcium, potassium, and magnesium, which can help control your blood pressure. Studies are actually showing that following the DASH diet can reduce the risk of cancer, cardiovascular risk factors, and both all-cause and cause-specific mortality. Going to another type of eating style that I'm sure everyone's heard about, the Mediterranean diet. This eating style was developed in the 1950s and is based off of the style of those who, the eating style of those who live in the Mediterranean region of the world, just how they're eating naturally. So this is also a kind of plant-focused diet. And the main foods consumed while following the Mediterranean diet are vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, olive oil. Once again, it is more plant-based. Meat is limited but not eliminated. The focus is eating more fatty fish like salmon and tuna, and then having moderate poultry like chicken and turkey, and then minimal red meat, maybe no more than once a week. The Mediterranean diet also encourages limiting the intake of sweets, sugary drinks, sodium, and the use of butter. So once again, cutting back on that saturated fat. Due to the plant-based nature of this eating style, it is also known to help reduce the risk of cancer, cardiovascular factors, and both all-cause and cause-specific mortality. So there's a trend here. There's a lot of long-term lifestyle benefits to a plant-forward focus. I'm not saying a vegetarian or a vegan diet, but just trying to encourage more plants and plant-based protein, adding more of those into your diet. As they do have, it has a lot of factors, a lot of protective factors with the DASH and the Mediterranean diet. I mentioned that it can help with your cardiovascular risk and cancer and mortality, but it can also help with obesity, diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure specifically. And once again, as I mentioned, driving that point home, plant-based eating styles promote moderation, not elimination, which means they're realistic and healthy to maintain long-term. The main con with a plant-forward focus really does depend on what style of eating or diet you're actually trying to go for. For instance, for vegans, they may need B12 supplementation because B12 is primarily found in animal protein. And also, depending on the individual, if you're prone to anemia, low iron in your blood, that may become a concern. There are plenty of plant-based foods that are high in iron, such as green leafy vegetables and beans, but it's not as bioavailable as iron found in red meat and other animal-based proteins, so supplementation may be necessary. But aside from that, there's little to no downsides to following a plant-forward eating style, especially if all food groups are included or if you are working with a doctor or a dietitian to make sure that you are supplementing properly. And then going over one more type of eating style before I wrap up, because it's gaining a lot more popularity recently, it's called intuitive eating. So intuitive eating is based on your actions surrounding food, not necessarily about the foods that you're choosing or the foods that you should or shouldn't eat. Intuitive eating is a self-care eating framework that integrates instinct, emotional, and rational thought. So instead of villainizing foods like many fad diets do, intuitive eating encourages you make peace with all foods by listening to your body. And that means listening to your hunger and fullness cues, which includes eating when hungry, um, stopping when you're full, which can include leaving food on the plate, but it's also about choosing the foods that will satisfy you the most. And this includes both physically and emotionally. Um, so, because of that, especially, choosing foods based on how you're feeling, what you know is going to satisfy you the most in general, it can take a lot of practice. And because it goes against a lot of our food beliefs, a lot of the foods that have been villainized and foods we may have tried to restrict for a majority of our life. So, because we are allowing ourselves to eat these foods we once restricted, it is important to note that initially you may see some weight fluctuation. You may see a little bit of weight gain because you might be eating these foods a lot more frequently, maybe in larger portions, because you have that freedom. But the good news is, over time, that novelty is going to wear off. You're no longer going to feel that food is what needs to satisfy you. It's not going to have that appeal anymore. It's just going to feel like a regular food you can eat whenever. So over time, it can actually encourage weight loss and long-term weight maintenance because you learn how to eat in moderation and you're not restricting food or food groups. So nothing is off limits. You're truly working to heal and improve your relationship with food. So overall, it's important to know that intuitive eating takes patience, being kind with yourself, and throwing away all the negative food noise that we've gotten used to over the years, which includes breaking those lifelong habits and beliefs that there are bad foods. In the long run, intuitive eating has consistently been shown to be beneficial for psychological well-being, which a lot of fad diets and diets that I've mentioned can do the opposite. But it is important to note that you still do have to have a general knowledge of basic healthy nutrition prior to starting the intuitive eating plan, because the overall goal is to make sure you are eating a balanced diet to nourish your body properly. Okay, to wrap it all up, we talked of, the truth about diets. So what's the secret? The path to success isn't about quick fixes. It's about making healthy lifestyle changes and ditching the diet mentality. And that's tough because we want to see the weight come off quickly. We want that instant gratification. But making those lifestyle changes helps encourage our long-term success, which is what we ultimately want. If we're making drastic changes that aren't sustainable long-term, it's far more likely that we're going to fall back into our old habits, regain the weight loss, if not even gain more weight, and lose any of those benefits we've seen from the diet changes. I always like to tell people it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so to sum it up, a couple things that you can focus on when working towards sustainable lifestyle change is practicing balance with foods. So instead of villainizing foods and trying to cut them out, focus on what healthy options you can add in. This way, you're actually naturally eating less of the foods lower in nutrient density over time without feeling deprived. It's significantly easier to add things in than focus on taking them out. It also, I say it all the time when I'm working with people. It's nothing is off limits. It is all about moderation. It's also going to be good to focus on eating whole foods, so limiting those processed foods because those whole foods, those fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean meats, beans, they're going to nourish the body most. And meal planning can make this change easier because it's taking a lot of the guesswork out of the everyday. It's also important to remember that for many, food isn't just about nourishing our body, it's also rooted in family traditions and religious practices. It's how we connect with our loved ones and our friends and our faith. And putting up strict rules surrounding food can absolutely impact that and our ability to really feel involved in some of those events and situations, which is why things, shouldn't be off limits. And outside of food choices, it's not just diet that encourages healthy lifestyle. It's also making sure you exercise, drink enough water, get enough sleep, and manage stress to really help your body function at top capacity. Also, check in with yourself. Think about how you're doing and feeling. And if you need extra support, ask for it, whether that be from a professional like a dietitian like myself or from a friend or a family member. There's no shame in asking for help. You do not have to make these changes by yourself. So just wrapping it all up, I always tell people every little change you make and maintain adds up over time and can help you reach your weight loss and other health goals. You don't have to do everything all at once. Baby steps. Like I said, marathon, not a sprint. Just make sure to listen to your body, do what feels best for you, and focus on what healthy changes are sustainable for you, so you can keep up with this long term. Okay.
Catherine,
you're up, Katie.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for all of that great information that you shared. Clearly, very evident how passionate you are about this topic. So, in the essence of time, what we are going to do, as mentioned, is finalize our discussion with some resources and related benefits that are available through the health plan. So before we get to that Q&A with Catherine, we'll run through some of these, but I encourage you, go into that Q&A. Any questions that might be stewing in your brain regarding what Catherine covered, go over into that Q&A, enter them in, and we'll get to them in just a minute. So one thing I do want to note when we're discussing these resources and related benefits is that the availability of some of the programs that we're going to discuss here does vary by contract. So once again, we either encourage you to log in to your Univera Healthcare online account to confirm and or call the customer care number on the back of your health insurance card. So the first program and benefit that I want to discuss is our member care management team, which is what Catherine is part of. So when she mentions that she is a registered dietitian part of the health plan, there is a full team of registered dietitians, very similar to her, that are waiting and ready to engage our members and support them on their well-being journey. So maybe it is looking for healthier eating tips. Maybe it is you are recently diagnosed with a chronic condition such as diabetes and are looking for guidance on what that means for your nutrition moving forward. You know, wherever you are in your well-being journey, if you will, our care management team, once again, that includes those registered dietitians, are waiting here to help, and it is all free of charge for our members to engage with this team. You can engage with them via phone call, as you see listed here on the slide, via email, or another great way to engage with them is through the WellFrame app, which is a free app for our Univera Healthcare members to download, create your account, and right through there is an embedded chat feature, so you can simply be texting. Very convenient, once again, to get that layer of support you may be looking for. So just want to call out the access code for WellFrame is Univera Welcome, all lowercase, all one word, if interested in exploring that benefit and access to the registered dietitians part of that team. Now, as Catherine mentioned, you know, really living a well-balanced lifestyle is all about making those good choices on a daily basis. And Univera Healthcare with our Perks View program can really help our members do just that. So this program offers exclusive discounts on healthy programs, products, and services and vendors throughout Western New York. So we encourage you to log into your member online account and receive those eligible discounts at any of the participating vendors just by showing your member ID card. And then the last little benefit here I wanted to mention is the Vitalize program. So some of our members, once again, this availability does vary, but it provides you access to the Vitalize Wellbeing platform housed through our partnership with Personify Health. So this platform is giving our members the tools and support you may need to make small, everyday changes to your well-being and that are focused in on the areas you want to improve the most, whether that be trying to eat healthier, whether that be trying to get more physical activity throughout your day, or maybe better manage your stress. You know, aren't we all? But once again, right through that Vitalize platform, a variety of tools and resources to support you on your well-being journey. Now, an additional benefit and resource through Vitalize is Food Smart. So this is a digital nutrition platform that is once again providing our members access to tools to help you make sustainable changes to your eating behaviors. So you have access to a Nutra quiz, which is once again looking at your current eating styles, behaviors, and patterns, and really giving you those recommended options and opportunities to improve your eating habits, giving you a vast option to healthy recipes, maybe based on whether you have intolerance, sensitivity, access to a grocery list to once again help make it easier to, if and when you have those recipes, actually get to the grocery store and shop for them. And of course, just a lot of information and resources on educational tips, tricks to make healthy eating more sustainable. So a lot of great resources. Once again, we wanted to cover at a very high level. So we encourage each of our members to once again check to see if those available programs would be available to you and engage with them to support your well-being. So with that being said, let's dive into the questions, the Q&A portion, if you will. So let's move over to the questions. We do have a question. So, Catherine, if you wouldn't mind, I'll read the questions out loud to you. And if you want to take a couple seconds to answer. First question that has come through is, what is your stance on calorie tracking? Is it safe and healthy to monitor with the food that they're eating, or just what is your stance on that?
Yeah, calorie tracking can be useful for some. For some, they don't necessarily find it useful. Really, it's highly individualized. Some people find it very helpful to write down what they're eating because it keeps them honest, it holds them accountable, and they can sometimes notice some trends. Maybe there's certain foods that are causing their calorie intake to creep up, which might be causing weight gain or, high blood sugars or anything like that. Some people find it to just be a hassle and a chore. So for those, it's not necessarily healthy or not necessarily good. But also, some people do find that they start to fixate. So that can kind of be some of those potential risks for eating disorders or just an unhealthy relationship with food. So it's really, I always tell people, if you're interested, try it out. But if it's a bore or you kind of notice you're really hyperfixating on things, then it might be something that you don't want to pursue.
No, that's a great call out. And one of the things that I kind of think about is a lot of people I think do still think about it as calorie tracking. And I know personally for me, I shifted to more of macro tracking, right? Looking at what I'm consuming through my carbohydrates, my proteins, and my fats, and really trying to make sure I'm getting an adequate amount of each of my macronutrients. But to your point, when I was starting to track macronutrients so much, I almost forgot about how much calories I was taking in. So it's kind of that healthy balance, if you will, I think, on tracking, but also being that mindful, intuitive eater, as you mentioned.
Absolutely.
All right, another question that has come through that this person has been seeing a lot of emphasis online about high protein diet. How do they know if following a protein diet is a fad diet, or how to find out more information about it in general?
Yeah, so it really depends on what type of like high protein diet you're seeing because some could just encourage the emphasis on protein, maybe smaller amounts of carbs, lower amounts of fats. If it's just kind of encouraging you to have a little bit more protein in your diet, then it's not necessarily a concern. The concern comes from when they're telling you to like eliminate different foods or, you can eat protein from meats, but you can't eat protein from beans or nuts or things like that. So, um, honestly, that's kind of where a dietitian comes into play because we can take a deeper look into what you're looking at and kind of give you some feedback because it really is highly specific. Most of the time, Americans do get enough protein, but there's actually some people who don't, and a higher protein diet can absolutely be beneficial for certain conditions as well, like diabetes, because it helps moderate your blood sugars. But on the flip side, if you have problems with your kidneys, higher protein can actually cause problems as well. So lots of variables to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I will say, in my role, oftentimes I am out at many different, community events, representing the health plan as a well-being consultant. And oftentimes people are coming up to me and want to share, their dietary choices and ask for recommendations. And one of my biggest takeaways is that it is very clinical, right? And very individualized. So that is where I am so happy to be able to point to the direction of our care management team and the registered dietitians, such as yourself, part of that team, because you are able to give that personalized, support and guidance to each of our members, right? And really support, whatever they may be looking for or going through based on maybe a condition or just wherever they fall into, once again, the nutrition journey, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's not a one size fits all approach.
No, absolutely. All right, another question. Is there such a thing as a dietitian that specializes in menopausal women? Do you have any guidance on that, Catherine?
I don't know of a specific certification, but like counselors and therapists or even doctors, there are some people who will specifically focus on a certain condition. So there are some dietitians that will focus their practice on specific areas of life or specific health conditions. So it's definitely possible that there are dietitians that kind of focus in on menopause. Um, but I'm not necessarily sure there's like a database or anything that you could find them. It would just be about kind of asking around, looking on websites and things like that. I mean, all dietitians are equipped for helping women going through menopause, but maybe not necessarily delving quite as deep as someone who's really, really making that their career focus.
Nope. Great call out. And I will give a little plug here for our Find a Doctor tool on the Univera Healthcare website for our members to be able to access. So you can always type in keywords such as, dietitian, nutritionist, see, once again, a listing of in-network providers if you are logged in specific to your plan. So hopefully can just, identify a little bit more of the in-network providers as well to be able to help support. All right. I think one new post that has come through. So, if you've been successful in losing weight over the past few months, but then you plateau, what is usually the culprit if you feel you're still doing the same thing? Any information to share there, Catherine?
That can be so many different things. Sometimes, I guess, a lot of time it can be maybe your exercise, your activity. It's possible you've fallen into kind of this routine and you're not necessarily challenging yourself anymore. But also, there are times when our diet subtly changes and we don't necessarily realize it. So your portion size might slightly increase, or you may have made a little tweak that is actually increasing your calories. It could also be other things too, if you have an increase in stress or a change in medication. But a lot of times it's just these tiny little things that slowly just kind of change over time, or for exercise, you're maybe not challenging yourself as much. Um, so sometimes kind of taking a step back and reevaluating. You might want to do a little bit of calorie tracking or at least a food diary to write down what you're eating, maybe your portions. I sometimes suggest people start like measuring their food for a little while to really hone in on how much they're eating to see if there's little tweaks you can make there, or, changing up your exercise plan, whether you are trying to maybe change the intensity or changing the weight or the style of exercise. So once again, highly, highly individualized. Um, but yeah, it can be so many different things. And that's one thing, shameless plug again, dietitians can help with, because we can really dive deep in, because so many times it's an easy fix, but when we're in it, when we're the one just racking our brain trying to figure out what is happening, why we've plateaued, sometimes we really don't have that out of the box thinking that a new fresh pair of eyes might have, if you're just kind of looking in going, oh, well, what about this? And then it's like a light bulb, you're like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Well, because you're very invested in your own situation, and it can be difficult to kind of do some brainstorming on your own.
Yep, that's a great point. And I think what happens is oftentimes people turn to, maybe the internet, Google what it says, and oftentimes that can lead to more questions, frustration, or like you said, you can turn to your team, your registered dietitians, to help support them and really get that individualized personal care. So with that being said, I know we are a few minutes over. So once again, Catherine, thank you for your information, your knowledge, your passion here today. I want to thank all the participants for joining. So with that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Keep in mind this was recorded, and the YouTube recording will be available within the next week or so on that Univera Healthcare YouTube page. So With that being said, hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Get out, enjoy the sunshine in this Western New York region, and hopefully we will see you next month for our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.